So to begin, we have what I like to call the ideal of enterprise change. And in the ideal of enterprise change, it is really a smooth transition from design through to implementation. When we start with change, we get all our leaders into a room for a couple of days to strategize, often to harvest the plans that they put together over the preceding months. A team of management consultants will come in with a very important perspective on the enterprise and its position in the industry market with key recommendations. Those are important. And starts with Exco and or their direct lines being circumspect about the value of the change as opposed to the way that they usually did annual strategy. Then they eventually get into it as the consultants absorb the information and play it back to them. They get more comfortable. And this becomes a way for them to structure the change into a nice vision, a nice blueprint that can chart the way forward for them. And this can be quite a blissful and motivating moment as the leadership who've never coordinated the efforts before now have a unified view of what the change is that needs to be brought. This is then presented to the board while the program is being mobilized. And the picture that's painted is that the place for change is just waiting there to be inserted in, almost like a missing piece in a puzzle. And then the enterprise will be complete and ready for its next challenge. If we look into the enterprise, what we actually find is not so neat and tidy, right? It actually becomes quite interesting. The products that have been developed and released to market, while externally do their job for customers, are actually quite complex underneath. As you walk the value streams from line to line, you really get to see this. And talk to anybody in a multi-product supply chain and ask them to make a change and see what kind of answer you're likely to get. Operating dysfunction is very common as the organization lacks the clarity on where to integrate and standardize processes. And this becomes kind of a breeding ground for situational logic. So what should we do right now in the conditions that we find ourselves in, rather than taking a more principled approach? Bespoke processes, as a result, are quite rife. Many in the organization have a justification for why they are special. Everybody wants to be special in the organization. And so they move away from industry-based practices where they shouldn't necessarily be doing so. It starts to get even more interesting when you walk the organization chart and try to figure out who is responsible for what. Again, more situational logic being applied. Who's responsible for what? And the real meat, I think, is this in the informal networks that are created, the alliances between people across those branches of the organizational hierarchy or structure. As people seek to be promoted, people want to be recognized, people want to be appreciated, and they want to grow in their careers. Trying to measure the performance of the organization is also quite interesting when you get past the annual reports and you dig deeper into to what the real metrics are. And then you find yourself having, but wait, what exactly is going on here? Those kind of moments. And needless to say, I think poor information technology, which I empathize with, it doesn't even need to be said that the amount of compounding technical debt that occurs has been created in systems and data across the enterprise. And of course, across enterprises, there may be more or less of this in place. And it could be as a result of operational people blocking changes that it may be in a good or poorer state. And of course, now what we're finding with digital transformation is that it's really amplifying this issue of technical debt and remediation. So the reality of enterprise change is that it is the execution challenge that's the real crux. So the consultants, they roll off to their next engagement after successful delivery. And what we have is this wishful change, right? And that gets translated into program vision and blueprint, and eventually a battery of change plans, which need to be managed into the organization. And what really happens is all the big change ends up being shifted to what we call Horizon 3. And then negotiation happens about what our quick wins are. What do we need to get in for this current financial year? And there's a rationale for that, because those are the ones that are the easiest to bring into the organization. They require less complexity, um, less disruption to operations, and of course the change management overhead for people is lesser. So it makes sense. But what happens is, if that mindset just keeps continuing on, is that before long the really ambitious change that we put forward here, this wishful change, actually turns out to be watered down as that horizon 3 just keeps shifting out. And what we have is this ambitious program ends up being tranched out. And as a result of those tranche reviews, we have new strategies that are kind of being inserted in as part of changes to the program. And before long, you have a new leader at the end of year 3 that comes into the organization and has a look at what the previous leadership did, disputes it, and then sets a new direction. And then a new set of consultants can come in, have a look at what's been done so far, and then readjust. And this is something that I've seen firsthand, is that often big ambitious plans can result in no real material change to the areas that matter, at the least. But at the worst, I think it's the potential consequence of deteriorating enterprise that is of real concern for me. So the dimensions of change are actually very crucial. I mean, this is what we need to be bringing into the organization. The purpose must be clear, or stated or restated, and the transition from what the organization is right now and where it needs to also be stated well. How value is to be created, delivered, and captured. Very importantly, what kind of shifts are to occur in the business model. The way the organization integrates and standardizes itself must be crystal clear, so that we know where and when we need to share and when we need to diverge, and what are the organizational impacts as a result. Change leadership, vital. You need those change leaders to come in and sell the change, and to make sure that there's solid leadership backing for the change. Otherwise, it will fizzle out. Governance is also quite important, because when you get to a state where the change is introduced, you need some guardrails to hold that change in place. And this is where decision rights, responsibilities, assurances are crucial to hold that status. Measurement ensures a solid link for benefits mapping. So instead of measurements being all over the place, now we can start to bring them together and bring them into more coherence. And then, of course, along with that as well, is scorecards start to get more harmonized as a result of that coherence. So now we have these two views, right? We've got the views of change, and we've got the views of the existing enterprise. And that's where I'd like to say is where I've observed this tectonic clash of those perspectives occurring, and who's going to give. So for alliances to hold the gray area of responsibilities and independent scorecards must remain, and a unified view of strategy and measurements is going to disrupt the status. Bespoke processes are being challenged by industry standards. So where there's no advantage, why are we doing things differently from the industry? So that we can really focus on the areas where we are going to make ourselves distinct in the marketplace. Operating dysfunction is challenged because the choice of configuration of the organization now as part of its target operating model is very clear about what we should be doing, where we standardize and where we integrate. Those markets are then served by value propositions that require reorientation of a complex product portfolio. And we can't serve necessarily all customers as aligned with our purpose. There may be a specific subset of customers that we really want to service well. And that means potentially, saying that we can't afford to serve other customers. And we know that managers and customers are also attached to those products that we have as our heritage. The new strategy is aligned with the purpose of the organization as stated by the board. The old strategies are also aligned to the strategic themes as specified by that same board. So, and then the technologists are crying out, some of them are crying out for technical debt remediation, where they've been really burning and struggling, and others may just be apathetic and languish in that complexity. While the new operating model is really bringing a fresh look at the platforms, for example, that the organization may need to go after. So I don't think it needs to be stated or overstated that people are the organization. They are at the heart of the of what how the organization works, and what change is really about. If you change people, you change the organization. The owners, as represented by the shareholders and the board, are the ones that set the mandate for the executives. And this means to serve a wide range of enterprise stakeholders, of course. And we're seeing that shift now from profit-centric to profit, people, and planet. Executives have a huge amount to wrap their heads around. There's the shift towards platforms and the need for compliance, and of course, pandemic notwithstanding, but also the squeeze on margins, while industry trends are also looming for them. And then you have the star players of managers, and these are the people that are really, in many organizations, these are the people that make organizations successful. They pick up the performance slack of the organization. Partners and suppliers, very important, almost two sides, yin and yang. Partners can make or break your business. The closer they are to the edge of value delivery, the closer they are to your customers. Suppliers can make or break your margin if you don't negotiate well with them and you don't have a codependent relationship, a beneficial relationship between you and them. And of course, operational staff, the lifeblood of the business. Now what we're seeing is the replacement of people with machines has obvious implications for the future of work, and new competencies required as a result. So change leaders are actually quite critical to bring the change in. They need to work with those people. And large part of it is communicating via the senior responsible owners, that change is actually feasible and it's on track and having the desired effects. They need to ensure the appropriate degree of intelligence is transferred across to the executives, also via the SROs. They need to inspire and get on side the star management team and work with the operational staff and really get them to embrace the change. And all this while skillfully navigating political landscapes, which promulgate as turf wars, and managing that engagement really well to build and promote the positive brand image for the change and make it desirable for everyone. So the architect, I like to think that the architect is the one that builds bridges for change using the architect's toolbox. And that largely is, in my view, my perspective and my experience, has been a function of visioning. So articulating what the vision is, or what the vision for the enterprise could be. Looking on the change side is knowing how to frame those changes and translate the changes into the organization, and then also working within the enterprise and knowing how to make sense of what's going on in the enterprise, which is quite complex, as we've established. So the architect's influence, in my view, is the scaffolding for that bridge. And if we look at the vision on the left-hand side to change leaders, it's to bring that vision to them and say, how is this vision integrated into the change that you want to make? And of course, the vision of the architect can't be something that's divorced from the purpose of the organization. It has to be one and the same. And the acid test for that is the architect's vision actually synonymous with the change? And maybe there might be a misalignment between the change and the purpose, or misalignment between the architect and the purpose. But I think it's good to have that kind of conversation with change leaders. And I think there's a good point of resonance there that architects can have with change leaders, just on the visioning component. And change leaders can actually start to rely on architects and lean on them because of the fact that they have a strong vision alignment. On the right-hand side, we've got the enterprise people, and that might be selling to them why this vision is good for them long-term. So for them to build their skills, for them to have diversification opportunities for their careers, and also to improve their performance within their jobs. The bottom two pillars, how to articulate and structure and sequence and evaluate the change. I think that's where the architect plays really well with things like roadmaps and improvement plans. Those are really useful to help the change leaders to sequence and structure that change. And then on the right-hand side, it's really just to identify the system and pull out what are those pains and what are those gain creators for each of those stakeholders that you want to communicate to. And their process models, landscape models can really help communicate very, very well. So the possibility of enterprise change, in my view, with influence should look something like this. That wistful change, we know, is going to be aspirational. Not everything in that change is going to actually make its way into the enterprise. And I think as architects, we do have that kind of level-headed view. Sometimes we can be a bit cynical, but I think we do embrace a level of pragmatism when it comes to bringing in change. We can use our toolbox to help influence that management cycle. So bringing in that change and working it through almost from the inside out to help get to the most optimistic view of what that change could be across all of those areas. And that looks very different from the previous kind of change management view, which is at the top, we've got some change, but at the bottom, we've really got no systemic change. And we can do nothing, or we could make the organization worse. So I'm going to share with you, on the back of that, my experiences in influencing change. These are four areas that that I've tried to influence change, and I've tried to communicate it. And I think this should serve as a good platform to help you through my three call-outs at the end, to help you as an architect and as an internal employee that may want to apply architectural thinking, as a consultant that needs to look at or look for people as change agents to help bring in the change successfully. My hope is that this will test with you well. So my first bit of experience was with a financial services firm, and this is bringing in a product information architecture to a technology product that the organization was selling. So our context was that we had a new business model. There was a shift in the holding structure, and we had to change our business model. And there were some real viability concerns of whether or not our products were going to make money in the market. Also coupled with that is significant organizational uncertainty as well. On the problem side, it was to launch a new product, and we were under real time pressures to ensure that that product really hit the market well. Along with that was a modernization of our approach with how we solved for that problem in the market, rather than using legacy approaches. It was a data analytics product, so we needed to really look at the way that we were delivering those kind of solutions out to market. And of course, high agility. So we wanted to be able to respond quickly to customer feedback and be able to add modules, add new features to this product. So the result of the influence that I provided into this was to help and show them through the prototyping of the product what a flexible data model might do to help structure the product in a way that we could still serve multiple market needs, but have almost a core stable layer in the middle that allows for sufficient flexibility and modularity and extensibility. And that, I think, was a key point where I had worked with the engineers, worked with the user-centered design people, worked with the product owner to help to shape that and to influence that early enough, such that that was actually our bedrock for future releases of that product. In fact, we did a re-platform, and as a result of re-platform, we actually leveraged and reused the data model that we put down. The result was that we had quick customer response times. We were able to respond very quickly with new features. We were able to deliver incremental value. And we also, as a bonus, we also received an award from the group as well, which was a very positive story. The lessons learned there was, for me, to really understand the customer usage scenarios early. And sometimes that can be difficult for an architect, but I think that's really important, is to understand what your use cases are. To have a stake in the product and own the solution, that was an important step that I needed to take to be able to sell the value of this data model. And very important was partnering with engineers and also partnering with user-centered design, product ownership, to be able to get over that hump of significant change with a modernized approach.
That is really great, Lyronne, and I'm sorry for interrupting. I know you have more on your mind.
Yes.
But there are also many other people who have more on their minds, and they're very eager to communicate some questions to you. Would that be okay?
That would be perfect, yes. I'm really happy to take questions at this point.
That is lovely, because actually I want to build on what you were just saying, because you were opening up the empirical, more anecdotal, applied theories in your latest, in the last part. And there were several people wondering, maybe you can give one more practical example of how you have applied this framework as a story to kind of prove your points as you've lived through this in real life.
Yeah. So I think the next case is actually a useful example, which is we were, and I'm not sure if you guys can see my screen, but I'm happy to talk through it as well. So the company, also a financial services company, was at a point at which we had acquired a large competitor, and they were much larger actually than ourselves, but we had significant buying power. There was a lack of understanding of how we should be bringing these organizations together, and at that point, we were not comfortable bringing in consultants to come in and help us with the M&A exercise. We were put under also significant pressure by our holding company to ensure a smooth transition into whatever the new world was. And had I stepped back and not inserted myself into that conversation, and at that point I was playing the role of solution architect, but I actually rose up to play the role of an enterprise architect. It would have pretty much played out as very much separate organizations with significant overlap in applications, significant overlap in processes, overlapping in products as well. And when I stepped in, one of the key things I tried to do was to communicate and to empathize with the people on the other end of the acquisition. And that was some hard yards, I must say, and it was some long conversations with people to almost act on behalf of or as a change agent to convince them about the need for change and rationalization, and that this was actually good for both of our companies because we both have strengths and weaknesses. And that took about a couple of months, probably about two and a half months of convincing and working with them, understanding the concerns, empathizing with them, listening to them. And collaborating with them and co-creating what this new world would be. And using architectural thinking, we rationalized effectively, a number of applications, probably hundreds of applications, down to a core set of applications. Along with that, we also convinced our business this is the way that we should be operating. And along with that as well, we actually found good dovetailing points for our products. So we could actually insert their products behind our products and actually make interesting new value propositions. So yeah, I thought that was probably a good, meaningful case.
I think so, and I really want to thank you for sharing such an insightful perspective with us. I can also see that Nick is really fascinated by your graphic expression here. Is it true that are these your own creations?
These are, yes. These are my own creations. Yes. Yeah, all homemade.
Nick tells us that they remind him of Quality Sweets chocolate hazelnuts.
Oh, lovely. That's all I can hope for.
All right. With that, Lyronne, I give you a big thanks from Oslo all the way to Cape Town. And I hope that you will continue carrying on this conversation with us. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.